Hello and welcome everyone to the product team meeting for March. Scott is out with his family on a well-deserved spring break, so Hila and I are hosting today's team meeting with the help from the rest of the team. Brian, you have the first question.
Thanks for hosting Anoop, and thanks for the presentation. Very detailed and well done. So if you can pass that on to the team, that'd be great. I know that the team had a number of key hires in budget that they wanted to make. I was just wondering if you could give an update on the hiring status to fill these roles.
Yeah, so we have various ones. So maybe David, can you cover the ones in your team, and then I'll go over them, and Hila can cover the ones in growth, and then I can go over the rest of them.
Yeah, sure. So on the director of product for SEC, we have a very good, healthy pipeline now via recruiting, and those interviews are kicking off this week. I don't have an ETA to when I think we'll be to a point where we close yet, but everybody in the team helped by doing a source-a-thon, and we've gotten some really good candidates that are now engaged. On the group manager positions that are highlighted, I think we'll be extending an offer for Create this week. I'm hoping we'll be able to do the same for Manage next week, and then that just kind of leaves Plan to be filled. Outside of that one, I don't think we've called out, but I think is also critical to our success is our compliance PM. That we also did a source-a-thon last week, and now have, I think it's a half dozen candidates in the pipeline who look very promising.
That's great. Any changes in the recruiting process with just the pandemic and more companies, hiring remote people that you've seen?
I don't think I've seen much of a change, other than I think we're going to run into a problem we haven't before. Like some of the companies who are first-time remote aren't factoring in location factor. So I had this happen once since I've been here, where a candidate was being offered the hour salary to live in remote Minnesota. And so some of the companies who are adjusting that are still kind of taking that approach of like, I'll just hire you at what I would pay you if you were here. And that could lead us into some awkward situations on candidates we think are well suited. I think we can work around it by maybe not matching, but our stock offering, as an example, the equity is usually more competitive, and I think we can try to leverage that to counterbalance it.
Great, thank you for the input and the context. Craig, you have number 3.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, I have to say I love the experiment readouts in the deck. It took me more time than I had planned to go through them, but there's just so much information there. So thank you for that. It's really, really helpful. And please continue that. I actually think this is a great forum to discuss wins and also learnings, right? If experiments don't work out, right? I think it's a really great forum to do that. 2 things I just wanted to double click on. One's the invite funnel, and the second is the kind of the lift and trials. But let's start with the first one, which is the invite funnel. It looks like a really interesting opportunity. I'd love to. And I looked through the charts that you had. I'm just trying to get a clean visualization of how you think about that funnel. And then I saw there's a lot of opportunities to try to optimize it. So I just love to see like what are the different drop-off points and how you think about the invite funnel, and do we have a clean data visualization of that anywhere?
Yeah, I can take this and then I can add my comment afterwards. So the clean data visualization is a little bit challenging in the sense that we don't have user ID tracking on the front end. So what we can look at is essentially, we can have some charts that can show us the invite sent to accepted rate for an individual invite. And then we can create some separate reporting for front end events, looking at what does the funnel look like from viewing particular pages without knowing who the user is, if that makes sense. So we're actively we see this as a huge area of opportunity, and we have I could share the epic here in a second, but we have an epic related to hard email confirmation where multiple teams on growth and manage access are working on improving that overall experience, which I'm pretty confident will have a nice impact in terms of the user accepted rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Craig, to give you an example, currently I think we don't have something called a magic link, meaning if you try to sign up, you confirm email, you come back, you need to fill in all the information all over again. And that also applies to the invitation flow. Imagine that. So like as part of the effort, we will be looking to implement that. That will help both the overall sign up success as well as the invitation sign up success.
And the team feels like you have good data on those drop-off points, so you can, as you run these things, you know, like, okay, we had 1% conversion and now 2% because of these changes. Like you feel good that you can measure those drop-off points in a meaningful way.
Yeah. So for those individual experiments, we can, and this kind of gets into your next question. We can understand our lift for like front-end experiments, but we can't track it to conversion. For experiments that are more back-end focused, like changing a overall experience for a namespace, let's say it's onboarding versus no onboarding, then yes, we can track that all the way to revenue, and we do.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. Awesome. All right. That's good. That's good to see. I liked the fact that when you run a test. So example in slide 15, the experiment, obviously the statistical significance, 2% lift. Awesome. We know those trials are real. And if you stick with that, you're going to get them forever. The next question is, okay, did the quality of the trials go down, or is it the same, meaning it's accretive, right? So like that's kind of the follow-up question. So
I totally agree with you on that one. I think in an ideal world, we would have user ID tracking, and that would be the natural thing we would look at is, do these users that have seen this higher level change on the front end early in the sign-up experience, do they go on to adopt the product at the same rate? And we can't answer that question today because we don't have user ID tracking. For experiments where we do, it's more of an experience change, then yes, that is something that we do look at.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. I think if there's a way that we can, follow as many tests through to, as many stages of that funnel as we can, so we can figure out, okay, we test one drop-off point, but then see how it all the way goes through. And I know it may increase experiment times because, as you go down the funnel, you need more data, more N, right? More data points in your test and control to kind of get to significance. But I think I think it'd be a good thing.
This is me thinking off the top of my head, and Mike, yep, feel free to jump in here. But I think with a new experiment framework that the engineering team has been putting a lot of effort into, cool. In theory, I believe we could create a purchase event and not necessarily know who the person is, but at least know if that purchase event occurred. And that would allow us to understand the impact just on like absolute conversions between a control and experiment. We wouldn't know the dollars, but at least we would have a pulse on the conversion rate.
Makes sense. Yeah. And there's like, it's actually more important to know that the conversion happened versus the dollar value, especially in these type of experiments, because you get into bias when you start to say, oh, look at that one, because you get one outlier who closed for $50,000. Like, oh, this is awesome. But, I think that the number of conversions is more important. So that sounds promising. And if we can do it with, obviously respecting user privacy in a way that makes sense, right? I think that's the right thing to do, and there's ways to do that. So
yeah,
awesome.
Thank you. Sid, you have the next one?
Yeah, I love the product driver data. The graphs are great, but also there's a lot of context about the data and the parts that are missing, the parts that we're adding. It's really good. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Sid. David?
Oh, I was just highlighting that we skipped over Gil's key hires, so I wanted to get the chance to outline those for the team as well.
Yeah, thank you, David. So yeah, really quick, I added under the second question as well. So we're hiring a manager of product data analysis. We have two pretty strong candidates, both at last stage. So I'm hopeful we can close this one. And then we have a product data analyst and a senior growth PM. Both we are interviewing. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you, Hila. Sid, you'd like to make?
Yeah, in the OKRs, KPIs, or in the OKRs, there's still a link between GitLab Private and Prospect One. I think the situation changed because GitHub launched GitHub AE, and it's now more of a competitive situation where we need to probably want to match that, and it's no longer dependent on Prospect One. So consider removing that from the OKR.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you. We'll do that.
The next one as well, great increase in the paid net promoter score to 33. That's awesome. First time we're almost the 95 percentile. We're almost within our goal of 40. So we might be there. We just don't know yet. But it's a great improvement from 25.
Thank you, Sid. And yeah, as a reminder, that's SaaS PNPS. And I know Farnoosh and team are working on self-managed PNPS. I was surprised not to see that question here. So maybe Farnoosh, we should just answer it anyway.
Yeah, actually, it might be a bit subtle. On slide 33, I highlight that we have an unofficial score of 31 from our doc site pilot for self-managed PNPS. We found that the doc site is not an ideal channel for self-managed PNPS, but we are going to continue down the path of upgrading our broadcast message feature capabilities to be able to collect our self-managed PNPS that way. So that is my current update, and hopefully more progress next time.
Thank you, Farnoosh.
Anoop, I had one tactical question. Did we rename TMAO to CMAO?
Yes, we did. I think based on the feedback from the last team meeting or group conversation, I don't remember, we changed TMAO to cumulative monthly active users.
Okay,
It's a
great.
duplicative summation of stages.
I will say, Greg, not to add any confusion, but we kind of had a CMAO, which was category MAO, which we now renamed it Cat MAO. So you might see that too, because at some of the stages we're reporting category MAO as part of the data to everyone.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just saw that it was a new term, so I had to look it up and just wanted to confirm. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we're not measuring cats, just to be clear.
You could, but
Do you want to verbalize your comment?
Yeah, based on the NPS survey and 13.10 release post discussion on Hacker News, both are full of complaints about the UX of our merge requests. Like that merge request review dealing with large diffs interface is like not doing what you expect it to do. It's slow, it's sluggish. I've seen a ton of it in both. Like there's I think 4 or 5 comments to that kind of effect in both items. And since like that's the core, if you had to point in one feature of GitLab, that's core. It's our merge request, and that's the core of our product. I know we already made improvement to the state there. It was very buggy. I think we fixed a lot of that, but it seems that so some of this might be trailing, but I'm worried that there's more needed. What do people think?
So I tend to agree. And if Christy's on the call, she can verbalize that. Yeah. Can you talk about what we're thinking of doing there?
Yeah, you bet. So yes, we know that MR usability is a problem that comes up as one of the key negative themes in SUS. What I've been discussing with both Anoop and Christopher so far, and starting to have a broader discussion, is a series of OKRs over Q2 and Q3 to address some of this. I'm not going to tell you to address all of it. The idea that we're thinking about now is during Q2, there's already a proposal from the development team to rework back-end things to make sure that business logic isn't leaking into the front end, which is one of the state problems that we're having right now. In parallel, what the design team would do during Q2 is rework our MR widgets based on a new framework that Pedro has been working on. And that would address usability concerns with the MR widgets. And then that would feed into Q3 where we'd actually implement those usability improvements. So Q2 would be about performance, stability, and teeing up usability improvements for Q3. That doesn't get into diffs and things like that, but the MR widgets are a key usability problem with MRs.
Cool. Yeah, and then diffs would be Q3.
Possibly. That's something that we could talk about having then designers go deep on diffs in Q3, and we could just kind of keep working in parallel if we wanted.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear. Glad you're on it. I think a lot of this is interaction, kind of like it's half a performance problem and it's half a UX problem. So it seems that this interaction between UX and performance is our Achilles heel, where we're no longer able to solve these things in one department, but we need to collaborate. So glad you're focusing on it. It seems important. Feel free to kind of try to load a lot of this in Q2, and then let's talk about how we have to maybe change the organization or maybe work different for one quarter to address this, because it seems something both important and urgent, and maybe we should accept some inefficiency in solving this. Inefficiency as moving people temporarily to that, or maybe ramping up the amount of calls about this, or I'm open to doing something inefficient since it's such a dire problem. Thanks, but glad it's already on your radar.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just confirm you're right. It is both performance and usability. You got it exactly right. One thing we are doing is moving a designer temporarily from Geo and distribute over to code review to support code review temporarily for a few months. And then Anoop and I are also talking about how we might get more design support on code review longer term. What we haven't talked about is developer resources. So that's something maybe we could discuss separately.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. That's perfect.
Thanks, Christy. I think, Craig, you have the next one.
Awesome. Yeah, I was looking at the stage per organization deep dive and you know, your reflections in slide 29. Pretty interesting chart that just shows kind of the curve of adoption. So I guess my conclusion was that if they haven't adopted a stage by day 15, it's unlikely that they're going to do so. Is that a fair assessment? And how is the team thinking about that?
I can speak to it, and I think Dave is here. He can speak a little bit more in terms of the data insights. High level, I tend to agree. Like that's why we choose to focus on the stage early on, stage adoption early on. However, for some of the stages, there are a longer tail as well. So the absolute percentage that will adopt a stage past the initial 30-day or 90 days is small. But we do see, for example, the CI adoption, it has a long tail. It's just really small, but it can happen afterwards. Majority focusing on the early on activity is pretty critical. That's why growth choose to focus there. Dave, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, thank you, Gila. In addition to what you had to say, there's a lot of by stage, there's certain stages where we're seeing not just the adoption of the first event, but the time to the second event we're seeing is very important, happening within even the first 3-5 days. An upcoming analysis we'll be doing here is also looking at the order of these stages adopted to see if there's certain user paths that lead to higher conversion rates to paid plan.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of other things with respect to customers. So smaller, but more, but an important group as well. We are starting to push data into Gainsight, and that can now help PAMs encourage stage adoption, and they can also see how the stage adoption is increasing or decreasing, which they didn't have the capability to do before. So that active sort of engagement is also gonna change, hopefully change this curve.
And to add one more thing to this, ideally in the next month or so, we're going to launch a new experiment where we give users the ability to a new space for continuous onboarding, so we can recommend additional stages and features for them to adopt. So ideally, get people to adopt one stage and then help them understand how they can become better at their job, so their organizations can become more efficient by further adoption of GitLab.
Sam, is that going to be heuristic based or more AI based on behaviors for the first version?
It's, you know, it's starting with our gut opinions, and the idea would be if this is successful, that then this becomes far more intelligent over time, and we devote more and more resources to, you know, showing people the right things at the right moment.
Awesome. So starting simple, I love it. That's
yeah,
great.
Yeah, it will become stage you also want to use like longer term.
Sounds real exciting. It's like I said, the insights in this deck are awesome. So thank you for that.
Sorry, one more thing to add to that, just to keep the party going. We also want to collect their self-designated jobs to be done in the account creation flow, and then tie that into that onboarding, so that if they say they're here for CI, we can change the order of the things we're recommending or something different depending on what they've said.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot more levers to pull here now that we are tracking this, including are things set up by default. So now there is a dashboard for that set up by default and working by default for each category. And we are conducting more research on which cross-stage moments are key cross-stage moments to encourage adoption from one stage into the other. So that's going to help us feed into product changes as well.
Awesome. And as you measure these things and publish, you know, like charts that show like funnel and stuff like that, if you need a guinea pig to say, does this make sense? Like, I'm happy to be that guinea pig. So I'm happy to help. So
that would be great, Craig. We'll run them through you.
Awesome. Any other questions? We have about a minute left. Great. Thank you for all the questions and interaction. Have a great day ahead.
Great job. Thank you.